Welcome back to our show. I'm Dr. Emily Carter, joined by my co-host, James Whittaker. Before we get started, please take a moment to like and subscribe to our show, if you're able to. Also, if you have the donate button, we always appreciate any support to help make our channel better. We are a new channel, and any support from our listeners means the world to us. Today, we're peeling back the layers on one of the most infamous figures in American criminal history, Jeffrey Dahmer. And it all starts, as so many of these stories do, with a chaotic childhood. This serial killer has gained more notice as of late due to increased documentaries and a recent show on Netflix, but we will aim to peel back the layers of fiction put on by films and show the monster underneath it all. James, would you say that there were signs in Dahmer's life that were indicators of the coming atrocities?
Yeah, Emily, Dahmer's early years? Man, it's sort of a textbook case of emotional turbulence, isn't it? Born in Milwaukee in 1960, first of two sons. His dad, Lionel, was busy with grad school, buried in chemistry, and his mom, Joyce, struggled with mental health, depression, anxiety, even suicide attempts. That mix didn't exactly create a stable environment for young Jeffrey. Not to mention the suspected abuse of prescription medication by his mother during her pregnancy.
Exactly. In my own work with childhood trauma, I see how emotional volatility in the home can lay a foundation for behavioral problems later. Dahmer's early withdrawal began after a double hernia surgery at age 4. It's not unusual to see such a formative medical event trigger lasting changes, especially when you consider that a procedure of this nature is traumatic for even adults to undergo. Teachers described him as increasingly subdued. Gone was the energetic toddler, replaced by a boy who kept to himself, longing for stability.
And there's this really strange, almost chilling detail, his fixation with animal bones. When he was 4, he saw his dad digging up animal bones, and he was oddly thrilled by the sound. Soon enough, he's searching for more, calling them fiddlesticks. It almost makes you wish someone had spotted how out of the ordinary all that really was. If they had, maybe the events that followed could have been averted.
Definitely. It was more than a childhood curiosity. It was the start of something brewing that was very dark. But back then, these signs slipped quietly under the radar.
What stands out next is the sheer instability, his parents' constant fighting, frequent moves, and his mother's repeated hospitalizations. By age 8, Dahmer had lived at half a dozen addresses. That's a lot of rootlessness for a kid, right? Every move just stripped away more chances at connection.
It really does. Attachment and a sense of belonging are critical at that age. Instead, he was left to cope with emotional neglect and an unpredictable home life. And when his brother David was born, even that was fraught with tension. Such persistent upheaval magnifies feelings of abandonment. Children in my previous cases who move as frequently as Dahmer often struggle deeply with relationships.
When you look into risk factors for juvenile crime, environmental instability, and poor parental involvement come up again and again. I mean, I covered enough of those stories reporting in Chicago. What you said, Emily, about attachment not taking hold, it's like a warning sign blinking bright red, but it's invisible until the damage is done.
That's the tragic part. No single moment, but a long chain of missed opportunities for intervention. If just one of these signs had triggered someone to step in, many lives could have been saved. By adolescence, Dahmer's behaviours escalated. He wasn't just interested in animal bones anymore. He began collecting, dissecting, and sometimes preserving dead animals in jars. His father, Lionel, actually thought this was a healthy scientific interest and taught him how to bleach bones, without realising the deeper, darker implications. I wonder if, in later years, his father looked back on these moments and regretted what he had taught his son.
Yeah, in retrospect, that's the kind of thing that gives you goosebumps. There's this story. Dahmer once decapitated a dog, stuck the head on a stake, and acted like he just found it when showing a friend. It sounds like a horror film, but to them it was just strange. These sorts of paraphilic or abnormal interests, if they go untreated, are real warning signs. And as you mentioned earlier, Emily, pretty much everyone missed them.
Right, James. In clinical terms, we call these paraphilic interests, specifically deriving sexual excitement from aberrant activities or objects. The lack of intervention is a repeating theme in cases like this. If anything, his curiosity about decomposition and the preservation of remains underscored just how far off the rails he was heading. Yet almost no one stepped in.
It's a pattern that's easy to criticize in hindsight, but society has a pretty poor track record for picking up on it in the moment. Especially back when Dahmer was a child, society as a whole had a don't ask, don't tell attitude when it came to other people's children.
Absolutely. Heavy alcohol use in adolescence is much more than acting out. It's often an attempt to self-medicate anxiety, alienation, or other psychological distress. The problem is, it numbs pain in the short term but reinforces disconnection in the long run. I'm always struck in substance abuse cases by how the habit starts as a coping mechanism and ends up magnifying the very issues it was supposed to mask.
That's something I've seen time and again in reporting. The high school teachers noticed. He was smart but disengaged. Everyone kind of shrugged it off as just Jeff. His grades tanked, but instead of real help, he just got more lost, more invisible. This would have made Dahmer feel hopeless as well as alone.
At this point in adolescence, Dahmer realised he was gay, but he kept it hidden because of social stigma. Back then, it was a very forbidden thing to be anything but heterosexual in public, so he had to hide who he really was. His struggle with identity and secrecy drove him further inward. What's chilling is how those inner conflicts began to merge with his fascination with anatomy. Fantasies of control and dominance over bodies and people. These thoughts gradually took on violent, even necrophilic elements.
You see this merging of obsession and sexual identity in a lot of the serial killers throughout time. When you have unresolved sexual confusion and it gets channeled into dark, isolated fantasy, studies show it can really boost the risk for aberrant behaviors down the line. Dahmer's own later confessions talked about these control fantasies, wanting an unresisting partner he could do anything to. We're not saying every isolated or closeted person goes down this path, but in isolation, all that intensity festers and mutates, and sometimes what comes out is horrifying.
Right. It's that potent combination of shame, secrecy, and unmanaged fantasy. Looking back, these themes are common in the clinical literature as predictive markers, especially when no one in a child's life is willing or able to intervene.
It's unnerving just how textbook some of these warning signs were, honestly. So it is 1978. Dahmer is 18, and his parents have split. His mom leaves with his brother. He's left totally alone in the family home. That's the setting for his first kill. Stephen Hicks, an 18-year-old hitchhiker he lured home with beer. Dahmer bludgeoned and strangled him, then dismembered and concealed the body. He even returned later to further destroy and scatter what was left, using some of the techniques he learned from his own father to help hide what he had done.
It's a mix of compulsion and calculation. Crossing the psychological threshold of murder is a massive leap, even for someone with long festering dark fantasies. Once that line is crossed, it often becomes much easier for it to happen again. What's notable is Dahmer's meticulousness, not just impulsive rage, but a systematic effort to erase evidence and maintain secrecy. This honestly shows that he was not dumb by any definition of the word, but was in fact very intelligent.
It's something you see across early offenders. There's usually this sharp escalation after the first act, like crossing a one-way bridge. In my cold case reporting, there was always a break in the pattern once that first crime was accomplished, and rarely did they look back.
And the cycle begins. Impulse becomes routine, and violence starts to feel normalized. After that first murder, Dahmer put huge effort into acting normal. He started college, bounced right out again, then, at his father's urging, enlisted in the army. Predictably, his drinking sabotaged everything. He was discharged in less than 2 years. Every time he tried to reintegrate through work or family, his addiction and instability caught up with him. There were multiple arrests for indecent exposure and disorderly conduct, but nothing truly addressed his core issues.
Social and occupational failures aren't just side effects for serial offenders, they're reinforcing. You see someone attempt routine, fail, feel that sense of alienation grow, then turn further inward. The system's focus was always on the symptoms, alcohol, lewd conduct, but nobody ever tackled the underlying pathology.
That loss of legitimate social bonds, compounded with active addiction, kept isolating Dahmer further. Time after time, he just slipped past any meaningful intervention, building momentum toward worse outcomes each time.
He was always spiraling, but from the outside it just looked like a string of bad decisions. Then in 1987, Dahmer starts killing again. The methods evolve. Sedatives, ritualistic dismemberment, necrophilia, even cannibalism. He keeps skulls, hearts, hands, all kinds of trophies. The horror reached a whole new level, and he got bolder. Chemical lobotomies, attempts to create zombies to keep his victims alive, but submissive. The sick pursuit of total control over another person became the entire point.
Ritual plays a huge role in serial homicide. It's about transforming fantasy into real-world action. For Dahmer, each kill wasn't just about the act itself, but about cementing total mastery over the victim, their memory, even their remains. It was also a way to address the pain and feelings of abandonment because his victims could never leave him. It goes beyond the physical, into the territory of deep psychological compulsion, compounded by untreated paraphilias and obsessive-compulsive traits. The escalation is stark. He needed greater risk and novelty to achieve the same psychological outcome over time.
There's a dark parallel here too. I covered cases, never ones this grotesque, but offenders who started with just murder and ended up with more elaborate, bizarre rituals as fantasy and reality blurred together. Dahmer's story is the textbook on escalation and boldness fed by fantasy. There are so many murders committed by this man, we will need another episode just dealing with those, so we will fast forward to his capture.
Dahmer was finally caught in July 1991, when Tracy Edwards managed to escape his apartment and flag down police. What officers found was, well, I don't know how else to put it, a house of horrors. Body parts everywhere, Polaroids documenting his crimes, chemical drums in the corner. During the interrogations, Dahmer confessed everything, even waiving his right to an attorney. He described his urges as, quote, an incessant and never-ending desire to be with someone at any cost.
The thoroughness of that confession is staggering. 60 hours recorded, 170-plus pages. Dahmer discussed necrophilia, cannibalism, and keeping remains as a way of making his victims part of him forever. There's always this question, did he feel genuine remorse, or was it another attempt at control, to command the narrative after being caught?
It's complicated. Legally, Dahmer was found sane. He knew right from wrong. Psychologically, he fit multiple personality disorder diagnoses, borderline, schizotypal, obsessive-compulsive, and, crucially, paraphilic disorders like necrophilia. In interviews and at trial, he sometimes expressed regret, saying he wished he could undo the harm, that he ultimately deserved death for what he'd done. But deep empathy was never evident until after capture, if at all. Remorse here can be mixed with shame, loneliness, and belated self-awareness.
Right. His confessions almost blur the line between responsibility and rationalization. He understood on some level how monstrous it was, yet it didn't stop him. Dahmer was sentenced to 16 life terms. In prison, he claimed to seek redemption, reading the Bible, being baptized, but redemption proved elusive. In 1994, fellow inmate Christopher Scarver killed him, claiming it was a divine act. Even in death, Dahmer was a source of pain and controversy. His conversion to Christianity was met with skepticism, and his victims' families had mixed reactions. Some felt relief, others said his death brought no closure.
The aftermath was complicated. The community of Milwaukee held vigils and tried to heal, but wounds ran deep. The media fascination never relented. The Oxford apartments where many murders took place were demolished, but the larger question of why lingered. Dahmer's case became a touchstone for discussions about mental illness, criminal justice failures, and the failures of society to protect the vulnerable and recognize warning signs.
If there's anything I still wrestle with, it's how a series of missed opportunities, at home, in school, through law enforcement, all compounded to let a deeply disturbed man go unchecked for years. When I reported on other high-profile killers, communities would gather, looking for either catharsis or answers. But in Dahmer's case, I'm not sure either truly arrived.
No, and perhaps that's why we're still talking about it, James. Understanding isn't closure, but it's a start. We'll continue exploring these difficult questions in future episodes as we look at what can be learned and, hopefully, prevented.
Thanks for joining us today. Emily, always a pleasure to dig into the shadows with you.
Likewise, James. Thank you to our listeners if you've made it this far. Take care of yourselves. We'll see you next time. Goodbye.
Goodbye, everyone.